Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to the paranormal side of this channel. Before we get into today's paranormal side, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's paranormal side. Shall we? Tonight's first experience on the paranormal side. As a child, I lived in houses built in the 1900s. We moved around a bit, but always stayed in the area of the city. And by that, I mean we would move like 3 streets over, or less than a mile away. We moved around a lot, actually. Well, this particular house, I was too young to really remember much because I was 4 or 5. But I do recall having a reoccurring nightmare. I would be getting chased by a witch, and not the stereotypical witch either. Like a real-life witch that blended in with everyone else. From the things I do actually remember is the feeling of being constantly watched and followed. Now, from the age of 5 to about 8, or maybe 10, we lived a couple of blocks over from that house. Being older, I started noticing things. There was one night that really stood out to me. I was lying in my bed, and it had to have been around 8 p.m., just because I remember it being dark and my mom was still awake. You know, the school night bedtimes and all that. I should mention we had cats, but they didn't have the force to do this, and even if it was them, they would have been growling or meowing at the very least. I was lying in bed, and I kid you not, from underneath the bed, there was a pounding. It shook the whole bed and even moved a little. The hardest impact was directly in the middle of my back. Miraculously, of course, my mother heard nothing until I yelled like a maniac for help. I told her what had happened, and she brushed it off. Right before leaving that place, I heard my mom talking on the phone, and she said someone was shot and killed in the bathtub, and their body was dragged down the stairs and thrown onto the front porch. Mind you, the whole time we lived there, I felt like I was being watched and followed as well. This time we moved about 3 streets over. I was 10. I lived in this house until I had finished high school. This house, I felt followed and watched as well, but I also felt terror. Real life, oh my God, I'm gonna die terror. But that type of terror was not consistent. It was only during certain times of the year. Weird. Either way, I slept in the attic. When you go up the attic stairs, my bed is basically right there in front of them, butt up against the wall. One day, I'm standing directly at the top of the stairs, and I see a woman on all 4s, jet black straight hair covering her face, running up the stairs. I look away, but look back instantly. I had to do a double take because what the F was that, you know? I looked back, and there was nothing there. I was stunned, literally. I couldn't move. My whole body was covered in chills, and every hair was standing up on end. Every day, there was pure torture. There was a constant rotten smell, which I always said smelled like burning vomit. There was always random noises that couldn't have just been pipes settling. Another thing is that there was country music. It would always be playing, but it came from nowhere. If you got quiet, you could hear the country music. But when you walked toward the source, you could never pinpoint where it was coming from. That one always got me. Especially at night when you're trying to sleep. You would just hear the country tune. Not even real words. They were out of range just enough so you couldn't exactly hear what the words were. Little fun fact for you all. The woman who ran up the stairs at me had the same feeling of being watched and followed I had my whole life. I'm pretty sure I channeled her more strongly during the years after using a Ouija board and calling to the ghosts. I think I locked her away, so to speak, by ignoring the noises and stopped giving her attention. Every now and then, I want to speak to her and find out why she did it and who she is, but honestly, I'm still too scared. Today's second experience on the paranormal side is a possible Dogman slash Sasquatch cryptid Udicide experience. So, this takes place in southeast Texas, within 100 miles of Houston. I was in college, but had moved back with my parents for the semester after some roommate drama. My parents live out in the country, miles outside of town, with some acreage. The land in the back of the house consists of 4 zones, really. You got the backyard with a nice St. Augustine, the back, which is a section of woods my parents cleared of underbrush and kept fairly maintained. The back, which is cleared, we used to go back and do bonfires and parties in high school, and then the woods. After high school, my parents kind of gave up on keeping back the brush and weeds from anything except their nice backyard section. So imagine a big backyard fenced by a wall of tall weeds, large trees that goes back a while, and then a field of giant weeds transitioning into solid, dense woods with oak, pine, yopin, briar, and all that. I also had this dog that my parents let me keep outside. They had a big chain link dog run she lived in since my parents had no perimeter fence besides some barbed wire at the very back of the property, and this dog was not the type to stay in one spot. In fact, she was aggressive to other dogs, always going after them and acting tough. And I sometimes worried she would get out and kill the neighbor's chickens. She was about 60 pounds and not a jumpy or skittish dog. Since I was in college, I had no curfew or anything, and would always come home late at night, early morning after hanging out with friends or studying or whatnot. On this particular night, it was pretty cold. 50 degrees is cold, can't tell me different. And even though she had a house and bed and straw out there, I felt bad for my dog, so I decided to bring her in and sleep in the garage. I should have been more careful because this happened quite a bit, but somehow this dog always got me. She would wait in the back until the gate was unlocked, and I was in the run, gate closed and unlocked horseshoe latch, run around me and pop the gate latch with her nose and bolt off. So of course she did this, and my dumbass was left standing on the run in the cold in the middle of the night. I was pissed because I knew I had to go and find her and bring her back. The moon's pretty bright, and I had seen her fly into the weed wall and disappear, so I followed her without the light, calling her name. There were some little trails through the weeds that we had tried to keep open so we could access the property, but these were less wide than a person can walk, and the weeds were about head taller than me. It was pretty dense. Anyway, I had gone a ways and had passed through the wooded section out into the clearing, solid weeds 5 to 8 feet tall. And I get quiet listening, trying to hear sounds of where she might have taken off to. I hear intermittent rustling out toward the woods, which at this point are just real tall, dark outline at the edge of the weed jungle. The rustling wasn't the sound I expected, since she usually was crashing through the woods. In my head, I'm thinking, what the hell is she doing now? Honestly thinking she's probably rolling around in some dead skunk and I'm going to have to give her a bath now. Figuring it was my dog, I make my way toward the noise, calling out to her. As I get closer, it becomes apparent. The rustling was not the sound of an animal charging through the underbrush, but more like something intentionally shaking the trees. Like if you would grab a branch and shake it, and all of the connected trees and vines would shake as well. I was close enough now to make out individual branch silhouettes at the top of the tree line, and could see that whatever was going on was causing the trees to shake all the way to the top. This was off, and decidedly not my dog prancing around. I shut up and froze. I hear all these stories of people talking about they notice the woods go silent. I can't remember if this happened or not, but I stood there. I clearly heard 2 or 3 loud, deep huffs. I guess it kind of sounded like a bull, but with a deeper fluttering to it. Not like a tonal sound a cow makes, but deep, heavy exhale when they're defensive, and seemed to come from around my head height. For some reason, my mind registered that this thing was a lot closer to me than the tree line. I also remember the distinct feeling that this noise was directed at me. I got a terrible feeling in my gut, like my whole body, fear and panic. Rational or not, I yelled my dog's name with all fear and urgency. You know how your voice gets higher and louder at the end? And turned and ran as fast and as hard as I could. Either my dog heard my tone and got scared, or she was scared of whatever was on the tree line as well, because as I crashed through the weeds, she came up on my left from a creek and flew past me like a bullet. When I got to the open garage, she was trying to get in the back door to the house, jumping on it like a crazy animal. I closed the garage and put her in her kennel and went back in the house and went to bed. I don't know what it was, and at the time I tried to convince myself it was a hog. I've been around plenty of cattle and have never heard one make noises quite like this. Not saying it couldn't have been, but something didn't feel right. This was like 10 years ago, but I know for sure I'm still going to think real hard about it if I ever have to go back out there alone at night. Today's third experience on the paranormal side. My grandparents have always acknowledged that their house was haunted, and I've had several experiences there, and so has everyone else who had spent some time there. So it's definitely not a secret. Though it's known that both my great-grandparents hang around, my great-grandfather actually passed in the house, and the previous owner of the land is supposed to be hanging around as well. More on that some other time, but when I was still a kid, 14 years old, my brother and I had a shared experience in our grandmother's art room that also served as our bedroom when we would spend summers with them. My brother, 12 at the time, and I were wrestling around on the bottom bunk of our metal bunk beds when we heard my grandma come down the hall and open the door next to ours. It was the back kitchen living room. It was a duplex, but they had added a door to connect the two houses once my uncle was injured and he needed access to both parts of the house, where they kept my uncle's dog because he had fleas. Sad, I know, but they would go to the back to let him outside. We heard her and George, the dog, walk down the hall and the door of my uncle's room open and close. To get to the hallway, you had to go through the front kitchen and my uncle's room to get to the back hallway. My brother and I thought nothing of it because it was normal for us to hear the back and forth foot traffic in the hall, either to the bathroom, the closets, or the back kitchen living room. But not long after my grandmother and George had left, probably 5 minutes or a little more, we weren't really paying attention because we were pretty much goofing off. We heard a knock on the bedroom door. We stopped playing and looked at each other for a moment because we hadn't heard my grandmother and George come back in, and it was too soon for her to be letting him in again. We said, "Come in," and we heard the sound of the baby gate scraping. My grandparents put a baby gate up so my grandma could leave the door to her art room open without the animals getting in, mainly the fat cats that were allowed to go anywhere but the art room. And we both saw the doorknob turn. It was one of those bar ones. I really don't know what they're called or how else to describe it. And the door swung open, but no one was there. We both panicked and ran down the hallway because there was no way anyone could have opened the door and just disappeared like that. The hall was just too long, and we would have heard footsteps on the old echoey hallway. We found my grandma in the front living room, playing games on her Kindle like she loves to do, and even though we already knew it couldn't have been her or my granddad, who was asleep in their bedroom connected to the front living room, since they took shifts to watch my uncle, who was handicapped, and my granddad was always on night shift before he passed away 2 years ago. We asked her if she had tried to play a prank on us and that it wasn't funny. She asked what we were talking about, and we told her. Without skipping a beat, she told us that we shouldn't be scared because it was just our great-grandmother, Marion, my granddad's late mother, and that she was just saying hi and checking in on us, and that she does the same to my grandparents by turning the TV on and off randomly, and would do so persistently until whoever was experiencing it said hi and told her everything was all right before letting them go back to whatever they were doing, usually sleeping. But needless to say, it still freaked my brother and I out pretty bad, and we decided to stay up front with my grandmother for the rest of the day, and for a week or so after, that we refused to go to bed by ourselves. We would wait until the other sibling was ready for bed before going back to the bedroom to sleep. Looking back, none of the experiences anyone has had in that house has been scary, so it feels foolish to have let the experience scare us so badly, but we were still just kids, and the idea of our dead great-grandmother coming in and checking on us, especially without us being able to see her, scared the living daylights out of us. Today's fourth experience on the paranormal side. 1985, Brockton, Massachusetts. We were young kids between the ages of 13 and 16. We lived in a 2.5-story home. We were in our room on the third floor when our black lab came flying up the stairs, barking to get our attention. The dog ran straight down to the basement where we found our bulkhead door had been forced open. Believing this could have been a possible burglary, we headed upstairs toward the main apartment on the second floor to call the police. My older brother lived on the first floor with his wife and kids and was not home at the time. As we were coming up the basement stairs, we heard something moving hurriedly in the first floor hallway above. Once we got to the first floor, we noticed the door to the back porch open, which is generally always closed. The bulb on the porch, unfortunately, was removed or blown. I can't really remember which. When we went onto the porch, we saw a dark, blackish or green entity crouched against the railing of the porch. At that crouching height, it was about 4 to 5 feet tall. It had glowing red eyes. It sprinted over the railing and headed toward the woods about 300 feet away. This made its height easily 6 to 8 feet. We ran into the house and called the police, who, after searching the house and neighborhood, believed it may have been an adult human who attempted to break in and mess with us, and called our parents as well, telling us to remain indoors with the doors locked. But this was no human. I remember it as if it was yesterday. I don't know if it was a cryptid or an alien entity. No UFO of any type was spotted leaving the area. I do know that it was not a human being. Today's fifth experience on the paranormal side. I was about 7 or 8 years old. It was summer, and we were in our usual place that we had always frequented from July to August. That day I remembered I had learned to use the bicycle, and so I asked my mother if I could go in the yard and try. My mom gave me the okay, and so I went. Just outside of the building, I met a little older child, maybe 10 or 11, and he asked me if I lived there, etc. In short, we didn't know each other, and he told me that he was the son of the 2 gentlemen who had rented the house next to ours, with the street number being 3. I immediately understood who he was referring to, and we made friends. I told him that I had just learned to pedal a bicycle and had to practice. He replied that he could help me. Being older, he already knew how to carry it out. We spent the whole afternoon pedaling the bike down the slope and climbing it back up. But being inexperienced, when I happened to make the descent, I could not brake in time and tumbled. The boy was laughing, and so was I, to tell the truth, because in the end, I wasn't hurt. Anyway, the afternoon ended. Both the boy and I had to go and say goodbye. I went home and told that I had met this child, and my mother understood who I was referring to, because the day before she had talked to the gentleman who had rented the house, and she knew they had a son. The next day came. I woke up happy, knowing that I'd spend another day having fun with my new friend. So I went down and knocked on the couple's villa, number 3. And as soon as they opened, I asked them if their son was in the house. They looked at me with a very strange air, and then they answered me saying that maybe I was at the wrong door, that they didn't have a son. So, thinking that I misunderstood, I asked them if they had a nephew who could play. And they said no. So I greeted them. You can't imagine my face at that moment. I wondered for who knows how long, who did I play with yesterday. But the thing that troubled me the most was that my mother knew them. She had confirmed it all that day before. So I went back home and told my mom about the situation. I still remember her answer. She told me that yesterday I had not gone down, that I had stayed at home playing with toys until evening. I told her about the boy in Villa number 3, but she didn't. She didn't understand what I was talking about since they had no children. At this point, I was convinced it was a joke. I insisted so much that she got angry. I remember that I looked at my arms and legs to look for bruises due to the bike, but there was nothing. Also because I actually didn't hurt myself by falling. Everyone, I swear to you, I still don't know what happened. I can't explain why the day before my mother knew about this family and the day after she didn't. I also checked in the following days, but nothing. I never saw that child again. After 30 years, I still can't explain the story to myself. A dream? It may be, but I am sure it was all true. I remember that moment very well, moment by moment, colors, noises, smells, all. That child was from another house, and then after the holidays he went away. Okay, but why didn't my mother remember it anymore? Who were you referring to when you told me about the family in Villa number 3? A journey into another dimension? A very real fantasy? A ghost? A misunderstanding? An extremely realistic dream. I don't know how else to explain it. Tonight's final experience on the paranormal side. I was an airman assigned to the Minuteman Missile Security. I was stationed in Malmstrom Air Force Base in Cascade County, Montana during the late 80s. This incident originated on the west side of Great Falls, Montana, in a more mountainous region. But my post was on the east side in the prairie lands. While on duty one night, the banjo alarms went off at one of the missile sites, and I responded with my team member. This particular site was in what appeared to be a crater, surrounded by high walls of dirt and a 7-foot fence with razor wire at the top of the dirt walls. Just before I proceeded down the stairs, I had a feeling like I was being watched and looked up the hill to my right. Standing behind the light pole stood something that was taller than the fence and had red eyes. I could see the entire outline of the figure, but couldn't make out details other than the red eyes reflecting back at me. Now mind you, I'm looking up the hill at this thing, and it's a head taller than the fence and razor wire, which made it at least 10 to 12 foot. It's important to note that I'd been at this site many times during daylight hours and knew there weren't any brush, trees, or anything else anywhere close to the fence line. The fact is what worried me. When I came back to the top, I looked at the light pole again, and it was still standing there. I called over my radio to my partner and asked if he could see anything near the pole, but he said he was too far away. When I finished up, I was supposed to walk the exterior of the fence, shut off the lights, and wait for the alarm to reset. Under normal circumstances, this didn't bother me, because I had my M16 and 210 rounds of 5.56, but on this particular night, the fence line didn't get walked. I'm naturally a skeptic. If I've never seen it, it doesn't exist. I believe in Bigfoot critters because I've seen one on 2 separate occasions during daylight. Once, while in my tree, I climbed 30 feet up into a tree and looked down at one about 30 to 40 yards from me standing in an opening. I don't believe in UFOs, aliens, the Loch Ness Monster, or any other phenomenon. That I have never witnessed. I believe in Bigfoot. I believe he is a natural creature like most humans. And what I saw that night, east of Maelstrom Air Force Base, may have been a Sasquatch because it was human-shaped, huge and likely 10 to 12 feet tall. I had no interest in verifying its identity. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's paranormal side. I kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit. Got some cryptids, possible Dogman, Sasquatch, got some paranormal, either poltergeists, haunted homes, what have you. I hope you enjoyed it. With that, please be kind to each other, and may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path we call life. Until tomorrow, my friends. Until tomorrow.